There is a very valid argument that these content platforms are stifling free speech. And it honestly doesn't matter if it's left or it's right. I think this is where the platforms have been struggling for months, years. It's just not working for them. And I think they're going to lose on this because what their job is to do is to help connect information and bring it together, right? The moment you try to become the arbiter of what is, right versus wrong, of what is true versus not, you're never going to get that right. I mean, you are never going to get that right.
There's this nice little snippet on TikTok from Joe Rogan about Facebook censorship. I think Facebook, honestly, out of all the big content platform, tech monopolies, is probably handling it better than most. But let's listen into what these guys had to say.
There's team lockdown and there's team freedom. There's only two teams.
Facebook took down a protest that was in opposition to social distancing and all these measures, and Facebook decided that was harmful and spreading false information. So they took down the actual protest.
Ain't right, man.
So think about this. What we're dealing with, guys, is true censorship.
Yeah.
And we don't believe in freedom of speech anymore. And you'll hear people who say things like this. We're a nation obsessed with freedom. Americans need to learn that freedom is not the end all and be all.
I don't want to
hear
that.
Bullshit.
It is, though. I posted that.
Dangerous.
No,
it's so dangerous.
I posted that on our chat.
But that's why.
What they were talking about on Joe Rogan was there were these, protests from people, wanting to have rallies. Some following social distancing guidelines and some not. But nonetheless, they were protesting, lockdown, shelter in place, these kinds of things. That's an American right. And Facebook was taking down the groups where they were trying to use to organize to run these rallies or protests. And that's what they were talking about on the Joe Rogan show where, hey, I mean, you can't do this. You can't. It's not like they broke a law. This was inappropriate. And Facebook was doing this in multiple states where they're taking, it was happened more than once on Facebook. Now you see Twitter fact checking the president's tweets by placing a warning on the tweet. So they decided to not take it down, but to, kind of put a disclaimer like, hey, learn the truth about what this is. You can click the information button and then Twitter will bring you to their own set of information or something like that, basically saying the opposite, where there isn't voter fraud from mail-in ballots and these kinds of things. And I think this is where the platforms have been struggling for months, years. And, they want to try and control this curation, and it's just not working for them. And I think they're going to lose on this because what their job is to do is to help connect information and bring it together, right? The moment you try to become the arbiter of what is, right versus wrong, of what is true versus not, you're never going to get that right. I mean, you are never going to get that right. And especially now in today's kind of ultra political culture and environment, right? Now these things become politicized and now the tech platforms get seen as being on one side or the other. I don't think they really want to be on one side or the other. But they're coming under pressure from the other side. If one side is saying something and it gets a lot of publicity, and then they're saying, well, the other side says, well, you're misleading people. Hey, platform, you need to educate people. And it just goes back and forth and back and forth. And I think that these platforms need to find a way to take themselves out of this. And rather than having things like matchmaking, which is one of the four core functions of a platform, rather than, them controlling all of the matchmaking, right? So, what content you see, what appears at the top of your feed versus, there's all this kind of talk about shadow banning, right? Posts. Or now you're seeing it try to suggest information about what is right or wrong, or Facebook taking down these posts or these groups with people trying to organize protests. You have this constant balance of what should the platform try to do itself versus what should it externalize, where you see kind of Google and YouTube trying to just automate it. You see Facebook having to hire thousands and thousands of people, either themselves or hire out other kind of contract agencies to help have humans review this information Twitter now trying to, propose alternative information. It's just not going to end well for any of them. And now you have Trump saying that he's going to regulate these tech platforms in a big way or shut them down entirely. And that's the fire they're playing with. And there is a very valid argument that these content platforms are stifling free speech. And it honestly doesn't matter if it's left or it's right. The point is that if you are a monopoly, which they are, and the reason why they are a monopoly is simple. Just ask yourself this. If Twitter were to ban Trump or, some big left icon or right icon from using Twitter, what other platform could that individual use to get their message out, which would have a similar content type, right? These kind of like short form text messages, right? Twitter owns the content platform in that product space, right? They have a monopoly on a content platform, a social network for short form text messages. Just like, YouTube has a monopoly on these longer form videos, just like you now have, basically Instagram and TikTok for shorter form video content. You have Facebook for, kind of images and social networking. And you kind of got Facebook, which is like the personal social network, and LinkedIn is the business social network. Each one of these content platforms monopolizes their respective space, right? Similarly, if you're a business professional and you do something to tick off LinkedIn and they ban you from LinkedIn, there's no other business social networking platform that you can go and use, right? So they have monopoly power, and you don't need to look at it from the consumer. You just need to look at it from the producer. If you are the producer, you're trying to get your message out there. These are absolutely public utilities in the sense of being able to use them. There's no other alternative channel, form of communication for that content type that you can use as a viable alternative. Now, the DOJ and the FTC have not been able to thread the needle on that antitrust argument. That's their own fault. They keep on trying to say that the consumer is at a disadvantage. All you need to do is say platforms have two customer relationships, a consumer and a producer. And why is a producer a customer to these content platforms? Because if you think about it, how does the content platform make money? Ads. So would you say that a customer is someone that is now giving you inventory for free and coming to you and is basically helping you generate revenue by giving you your inventory for free? Wouldn't that fit the profile of a customer? Isn't that customer effectively paying YouTube or any of these ad-driven platforms where YouTube has like a 55-60% ad revenue split? So if I'm creating videos, I get $1 worth of ads, I'm effectively giving YouTube 40-45% of that dollar as the fee. And so I would say, yeah, I'm a customer of YouTube if I'm a content creator, right? And similarly, the shorter form content platforms, the Twitter, the Instagrams, et cetera, they actually just take all the ad revenue, and the producers actually don't get any of that. They just get kind of status and audience and all this kind of stuff. So I think you can absolutely establish the customer relationship with the producers. And the question is, does the producer have any other alternative channels to go to? And the answer is no, they don't. Now, the DOJ, FTC haven't been able to thread the needle on that antitrust argument, but I think thinking about these companies as public utilities, and then you say, okay, well, if they ban you, or if you don't have the ability to rebut them, right? Or if they kick you off and you have no recourse to say, hey, why did you kick me off? Which we've seen with both left and right and religious figures, right? Where you have now different religious groups on these content platforms, again, flagging the other group's content for being abusive or in violation or whatever. And then it creates all the algorithms into disarray. It puts all the human moderators into disarray. And then people get thrown off the platform, and there's no really due recourse for a lot of these creators. And so you don't really have the ability to rebut it properly. So now you're kicked off. And this is the challenge, right? This is where the government's role is there to provide guidelines about what is appropriate and inappropriate, right? How should you regulate abusive content creators? What kind of recourse should you provide if someone wants to rebut, a negative action that's taken against you, and so on and so forth. Right now, each platform is kind of creating its own standards. We've seen Facebook now try to create this kind of community of like content spiritual, visionaries that are supposed to be third parties providing guidance about what the guidelines should look like. Everyone's trying to do their own thing here. And this is the whole point, is to say, well, you need to have a public forum, a public debate about saying, well, if this is a public utility, we need to have a public debate about what is the appropriate behavior of the public utility, i.e. the platform company, the private platform company, and how they should handle themselves. Just like if you're in a movie theater and you yell fire and you say, well, and you could get in trouble for that if you are lying and you make that up. But there's been public debate around why that's inappropriate, about kind of due course from a legal and jurisdictional standpoint, about, you can't kind of just incite fear for the wrong reasons like that and panic. And so there's now precedent. There's been a public dialogue around that, and you get that outcome, right? Where it's not a violation of it's not a violation of free speech if you get in trouble for yelling fire inappropriately in a movie theater and inciting panic. Okay. And that's been a part of the public dialogue. We haven't had the public dialogue. We haven't had this dynamic of how should you think about opening up, say, regulators to look at how the platform is handling matchmaking, how the platform is handling taking down content, and banning users, what kind of recourse the users have when they are banned. That needs to happen. Eventually it's going to happen. And Facebook, I think probably I give the best ranking to Facebook in terms of how they've tried to handle this, right? Where you have Zuckerberg, who's come out and said, hey, we want to be regulated. We want guidance from the government on this, because he knows this is going to happen. We're going into an election year. This is an election year. Both sides are going to get super heated, and Facebook's never going to be able to thread the needle on this. He knows that. And so he's asked for the government to regulate him June of last year at the Aspen Festival. They haven't done anything. They haven't even regulated or tried to provide guidance on this. So everyone's trying to plot their own course. I think the more that, for example, Twitter going in this direction, this is the wrong direction. The more you're trying to put these kind of like hard rules or inserting yourself directly into the conversation, that ultimately is going to backfire on you. And now you're just making yourself a biased party to that conversation. Now, where do you draw the line on, where is it appropriate for you to put these little information symbols and where is it not appropriate? And you're never going to be able to figure out when it's right or wrong. And everyone's going to have an opinion about when it's right and wrong. So why put yourself in that position in the first place? I don't think it makes much sense. I think it just puts them at a unnecessary vulnerability and liability for the company. Hi, this is Alex from Winner Take All. Thanks for joining us. Hope you enjoyed the content. Feel free to leave a comment, ask us questions, and definitely make sure to join us on our next live stream.